All right. Hello, everyone. I can see Zoom is admitting attendees. And I'm here joining you from Boston, while Brett's in New Zealand and Liam's, where are you at, Liam?
NewCastle, Australia.
Right. And then John is also in Massachusetts somewhere?
In Florida.
Florida, okay.
Same time zone though. Hello.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so we're talking about VMSSPI today. We have Brett Cameron, Director of Application Services at VMS Software. We have John Cedar, Senior Support Engineer, also at VMS Software, and Liam is an IT Systems Engineer at NGMG in Australia. All right, we have 42 attendees, and maybe we should be starting already. What do you guys think?
Go for it.
How many were signed up?
I don't know. Kara, do you know?
Muted, sorry, around 80 people. But
Okay, wait for a couple minutes and
Be back in about 10 seconds.
okay, we're at 53. Or should we slowly get going?
Yep.
Is there like music playing, or is there an opening act or comedian or something? A warm-up act.
Hey, John, we're the entertainment man.
That's it.
I think Brett could play something actually.
I came into the office, so the guitars are at home, Darren.
Okay. All right, then we might be ready to start.
Just had a pop-up that said my audio changed. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we starting with you, Brett?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want me to kick things off, Daria?
Yeah, I think you can start sharing.
Okay.
We're at
Let's see.
60 people. It's a fair amount. I think the other.
Okay.
Sure.
Alrighty. Okay. So am I sharing?
And no.
I'm not sharing. Share. How about now?
There we go.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, look, thanks everybody for dialing in, wherever you may be. As Daria said, you've got myself, Brett Cameron, down in New Zealand. It's 4 o'clock in the morning here, so if you hear a loud thud, it's my head hitting the desk. We've got John Cedar, who's probably in a more amenable time zone in Florida. And we've got Liam across, as we say in New Zealand and Australia, across the ditch in Australia. It's probably about 2 o'clock in the morning for Liam, which is, I think, a fairly normal hour of the day for him, but that's another story. Anyway, so look, we're going to kick off here. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview of the VMSSPI product. I'll try and get through that reasonably quickly. I'll then hand over to John, who will go into things in a little bit more depth and do a bit of a demo for you. And followed by John, Liam will talk a little bit about some of the things that he's been doing in the course of his work with VMSSPI. And we'll then finish up, hopefully, with a few questions. But moving right along, once I click in the right screen, what is this VMSSPI thing that we've been talking about? And some of you, I'm sure, have read the rather lengthy blog post, the link on the webpage on the screen there, rather, which gives you a bit of background on how VMSSPI came to be and how we kind of arrived where we are today. Essentially, this thing is a package that can be used to monitor your OpenVMS systems, monitoring many things in pretty much near real time. It can tell you a lot about what's going on in your system in terms of performance, security-related events, and so forth. Now, if you have had trouble sleeping and taken the time to read that blog post that I created around the end of January, you will have learned that VMSSPI dates back to HP OpenView days. It essentially, the core of VMSSPI is exactly the same code as is in the OpenView agent, the VMSSPI OpenView agent for OpenVMS. But what we've done is we've pretty much totally decoupled it. Well, we have 100% decoupled it from OpenView, and we've modified it to work with newer, more modern incident management services such as Splunk, Datadog, PagerDuty, Dynatrace, as I've listed on the screen there. We've also enhanced it to send alerts and so forth via email. It can hook into a remote or a centralized syslog daemon. Quite often we're finding that some of our customers find that useful. You pump the alerts into a centralized syslog daemon, and there are a whole myriad of incident management solutions that can pick things up from syslog and so forth. For testing purposes, John and myself quite often make use of one of our internal Slack channels, publishing alerts and events to Slack channels. And you can also distribute events via protocols such as MQTT and things like that. So what we've done really, as I say, we've decoupled the old SPI agent from OpenView, and we've implemented these different communications modules. So hypothetically, if you came to us tomorrow and said, hey, could this thing send alerts to incident management system XYZ, I would probably say yes and then regret it, but chances are we can do it, right? So Liam is talking about OpsGenie and things like that. You know, theoretically, we can develop interface modules for VMSSPI to send alerts to whatever you have within reason. In terms of core functionality, SPI has 3 main modules. It's got the system module, which keeps an eye on any kind of system-related items, processes running on the system, shadow sets, queues, disks, things like that. There's the performance module, which keeps an eye on, well, as you'd imagine, system performance. This could be looking for things like looping processes or other performance-related issues, and raising alerts based on various thresholds associated with those resources. The system and performance modules do periodic scans every minute or so. That's configurable, of course. In contrast, the security module reports essentially in near real time, taking a feed from the audit server on any security related events that might happen on the system. Someone trying to break in, or someone modifying something in authorize, or whatever. Plus, there's a relatively new and experimental performance metrics module. Liam will probably talk a little bit more about that, which makes use of some of the metrics that are collected by VMSSPI during the course of its work and makes them available for consumption via Prometheus, which some of you may know is a fairly popular monitoring solution. We'll look a little bit at that later on. In terms of the system module, like I said, it's activated at regular time intervals, maybe every 1 minute or whatever, configurable. And it will report on all or some of the items that I've listed there. It's probably a few more than I've listed, to be honest. So any changes in error count, changes to your cluster, batch queue status, and things like that. And some of these things like batch queue status and so forth, batch job status, you can configure it so it's only going to be monitoring those at specific times of the day, as opposed to continuously. You know, it might be important to you that a batch queue only runs between midnight and 6 o'clock in the morning or something like that. Outside of that time window, you maybe don't care so much. So you can configure the system to work in that way. I pasted in there a little screenshot from Datadog, which appears to be showing, you know, an alert relating to a process missing. One of the Apache processes has died. This would be a fairly typical kind of system event that could be raised. The performance module, as I mentioned, that's monitoring things that relate to the overall performance of the system. And the little screenshot I've got there is a piece of fairly raw alert data published to Datadog again. You know, the system's not happy with the buffered IO rate, whatever threshold. It looks like it was a warning threshold or something like that. So it's raised an alert based on that measurement. But the performance module can monitor all of the items that I've listed there. Obvious things like CPU and memory utilization, page fault rates, network utilization. It can identify looping processes, and per the screenshot, the picture I've got there, direct IO, buffered IO rates, and so forth. And you can configure various thresholds. You can configure multiple thresholds if you like, to raise alerts at different levels. The security module, the other main module, like I said before, is essentially monitoring things in real time, taking a feed from the audit server. And you can configure this to kind of raise alarms on pretty much anything that the audit server can spit out. Now, some care is required here because the audit server can spit out quite a lot of things. And we've had the situation, in fact, Liam could probably talk a little bit about his experience here, where you can inadvertently overload the audit server mailbox if you're not careful. If you have things a little bit too granular, for example, let's say you're running a nightly backup or something like that, and every time a file gets touched, you know, an alert's going to be raised. That's probably not what you want to see. In the case of the message I've pasted in here on the screen, this is just me messing around, changing user Biggles page file quota. I have things configured on one of my systems to raise an alert when that event occurs. In terms of configuration of VMSSPI, it's relatively straightforward. If you're familiar with it from using it with OpenView in days gone by, the primary configuration file you can actually use with this new updated version without change. But we have added a second configuration file, which I'll talk about in a moment, and John will probably elaborate on. But the main configuration file basically allows you to define the items that you want to monitor and when you want to monitor them. You know, you want to monitor batch queues between some time window or whatever, and things like that. So fairly straightforward, and that's uses a fairly obvious looking VMS-like syntax to specify various things. Now I have flagged on there to take note of the action and metrics options or qualifiers that I've put against the Apache process there. These are actually new additions, things that we've added. Of course, they're qualifiers, so they're entirely optional. But in this particular case, the action qualifier specifies an action to take when an event occurs. So in this case, if VMSSPI detects that the Apache process has died for some reason, the action would be to run the Apache startup. Maybe that's not the best action, but that's what I've got in the configuration file. So you can do that. You can associate actions with events, and some of these actions you can specify in this primary configuration file, and other actions you can specify at a more granular level in the other configuration file, which I'll talk about very shortly. The metrics qualifier is relatively new, will be available in the next release, and it basically allows you to record metrics via the Prometheus interface on a per process basis. Generally not a good idea to capture metrics for every process that's running on the system. Some of you may have hundreds or thousands of processes running on the system, so you don't really want the metrics for all of those processes. But there might be specific processes running on the system for which you want to gather metrics data, and you can flag that as I've illustrated there, specifying the metrics qualifier, and you can then configure up your Prometheus interface to collect those metrics. So the second configuration file, which is something we've added, and it's got the rather boring name of being the messages file. So the core purpose of the messages file really is to define the different alerts, alert types, and their characteristics. So for example, buffered IO alerts, you could specify various characteristics such as different thresholds. If it's 75% above some value or whatever, then raise a warning. If it's 90%, raise a critical alert or whatever. And as I say, John will show you examples of that and go through it in a little bit more detail. So essentially the message file describes details about how the alerts will be reported, whether it's via email or using an interface to something like Splunk or Datadog or whatever. And it's broken up into two sections. The initial section contains higher level configuration data or global configuration data, such as how emails will be handled if you want to use them, and the alerting module configuration, like I say, Splunk, Dynatrace, PagerDuty, etc. The second section, which is where all the action happens, really are customizable definitions for all of the messages and alerts that can be reported by the system. Like I say, John will go into this in a little bit more detail, and he'll show you some examples. And if you don't like the syntax of this file, well, you can blame me for that. It seemed like a good idea at the time. We had to convert what was used by OpenView into something that was not quite so proprietary, for lack of a better description, and we came up with the syntax for the messages file that you'll see shortly. I mentioned several times, in fact, that we've now got this somewhat experimental module that will be available in the next release that allows you to hook into some of the metrics that are gathered by VMSSPI using the Prometheus monitoring solution. And I've listed the various metrics that you can hook into there. You can have quite a lot of fun with this if you're good with graphics and so forth, which I'm not. You can use Prometheus in conjunction with Grafana to create some really very, very useful graphs, and Liam will go into that in a little bit more detail. I've highlighted a couple of items there in blue, percent disk full and per process metrics, simply because they're relatively new. Liam asked if we could incorporate the percent disk full, so I've done that at his bequest, and I mentioned the per process metrics before. And like I say, we could look to pick up a whole lot more metrics here and make them available, but what the system currently provides, I think, is a very useful core set of metrics, and you're gathering these, you're seeing this data in near real time. If you then have something like T4 or whatever for more capacity planning type analysis or whatever, you've kind of got all the bases covered. And realistically, in real time, you have to be very careful. You don't want to be gathering too many metrics, because the measurement of that data is actually going to start influencing the results, right? So the idea here is to just present a core set of useful metrics that you can look at in real time, gives you a general overview of how the system's performing, and whether there's something you maybe should be worried about or whatever. So it's not meant to be some sort of performance monitoring tool. It's just a nice simple way of allowing you to hook into some critical data there. Just talked a little bit there in the pop-up about Prometheus and Grafana, but you can look at that information offline if you're not familiar with it. So in summary, the aim of VMSSPI is to provide a useful tool for monitoring and alerting, different situations, problems that can occur on your VMS systems, and to provide a mechanism to publish those alerts to modern and often cloud-based services such as Splunk and PagerDuty, Dynatrace, Datadog. It's pretty flexible, it's easy to use and configure, and it's proving to be a very useful tool for our managed services team in client engagements and so forth. Whilst it is straightforward to install and get up and running, we do recommend that you engage someone such as John Cedar to help you get the most out of the product in a professional services capacity. It's generally a good idea. And we do have a bit of a roadmap for the product. There are some interesting future plans, some additional integrations which tend to be driven by customer requirements. I mentioned the syslog daemon interface, for example, that was driven by a customer requirement. And we'll probably look to expose some additional metrics as well. Now, before we hand over to John, if you can type really quickly, and once I drop off and hand over to John, I'll put it in chat. But just so that you can monitor yourselves what John is doing and some of the alerts that he'll trigger. We've hooked things up. If you browse to the address I put there, as I say, I'll paste it in chat very, very shortly. We've set up a little interface on a web page so that whenever John raises an alert in his demo, you'll see that come through within a second or two on your screen as well. I won't bore you with the details of how that hangs together. It's a little bit of magic. But it's a mechanism that will allow all of you to see what's going on here. Okay, so with that, I'll hand over to you, John.
All right, thank you, Brett.
You're able to steal the screen from me.
There we go. All right, yeah, I just let me share now. It says I cannot start screen share while the other participant is sharing.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll unshare. How do I do that? Yara, do you want to steal this off me, or what do I got? Stop sharing. There we go.
All right. And let me find a screen to share here. All right. Is there? Can everyone see a black screen with a DCL thing on the top?
Yep.
All right. Clear out some of my stuff here so I can see. All right. So yeah, thank you, Brett, for laying that out. Now, yeah, we're gonna run through a few demos to kind of see how this thing works and what happens. So yeah, let's go break some stuff. So first, we're gonna talk about looping processes. This is one of the simpler ones, and we can. What I'm going to do is over here, I'm going to set up. I'm going to start. Sorry. So I just started off a procedure that's going to just run in a loop. And then I'm going to throw a monitor or not so we see that it's running. It's pretty much in a tight loop. So what that's doing in the background is demo. Basically, I submitted a job that's running is a detached job that's doing this, running a process, and it's just doing a show time count one, and it'll stop after 100 million times. So as Brett was mentioning in the messages file, and one thing to consider is, like, usually I look at the configuration file as what we're looking at, and I look at the messages file as what we're going to do. So in this case, let me look at the message file and search for process looping. Now, I set up a mailing list that just comes to me for this, for the sake of this example. But you can set up as many mailing lists as you want or need. You can, set up distributions with multiple people. For every event, you could theoretically have one for everything. So basically, here's what's going on in this paragraph here. And this is some of the components of it that are pretty standard across all of them. So we'll have a subject. This is the subject line of the email or the message. The severity is just a warning in this case. We can modify these to be in different things. Alias, here's the mailing list. So the action for this, we're supplying one that says we're going to run a procedure that's called SPI-lowerpriority.com, and we're going to pass it to PID. This, I'll show you this in a second. You can do how, in this case, I just set the priority to 1 on the job. And and we're in performance, and then the notes, there appears to be a looping process. So let's go take a look and see. So we're still a priority 4. Something to talk about real quick is the polling intervals. Brett had mentioned that there's one that you can set in the config file that is defaulted to 60 seconds. I usually set it for 30 seconds because I'm impatient. But all of these different components use different timers. The one that we're looking at right now is third from the bottom. We're in looping processes. That's going to, it's going to poll every 2 minutes, and the criteria is that the process has to be running. Take up 1 CPU for 2 minutes. So let's see what's going on over there. So, so the process that's going to run is VMSSPI $. Is this? I tried really hard to make this look more big and important, but the only line that's really doing anything here is we're doing a set proc/prio equals 1 and passing it to PID. Like I said, you could have this, because it's just a DCL procedure, you could have this go out and collect data. You could have it go out and shoot the process. You could, there's a lot of things you can do with it once we've triggered this alert. So that gives you some flexibility as far as like just, not being just an alerting system. Let's take a look and see what's going on over here. Okay, so this thing has run, and we see that it's at now it's at priority 1. Now it's still looping, and it's still taking up CPU because it's not contending with anything else in the system. But now we're going to, where'd it go? Sorry. There it is. So we see that Slack reported it. We have process demo loop that owned by me, seems to be looping and set the priority to 1. Meanwhile, over in Outlook, I did get a message for that. The process is looping, and here's the text that we saw in there, and the notes. There appears to be a looping process setting priority to 1. So that's all there is to that one. Like I said, it was a fairly simple one. Let me kill this monitor and kill the process. So the next one that we want to look at is we're going to do look at a missing process. So now, as Brett said, excuse me, there are find SPI. There's 3 different modules in here. Each one has their own process that takes care of things for system performance and security. So for missing processes, in the initial version of messages.txt, we'll see that, sorry, I keep saying, my apologies. Here's some of the details of it. So we have a process is or was missing. It's showing up as critical. The text here, the process, it just plugs in the process name, is or was missing. And the action was initially to run sysdollar-manager restart.com and pass it the process name. The problem with that is that if you have several processes on your system, all you're passing here is a process name. So you'd need to build a matrix or a database or an array to say, okay, well, I got this process name ABC123. I need to restart it, but I need to go look up who's going to be the user, where the command procedure is, where the log file is, things like that. So we to kind of get around to kind of embellish that, basically, we went into let's see, and if I do a process missing. Now we see that we change things around. The subject used to be a process is or wasn't missing, but now we're changing it to be that we're plugging in the text, which we're going to find down here. Text was blank. Now it's this process, blah, blah, blah. So basically we're moving the message from inside the text of the email to actually the subject. So now we're going to see, and we'll see later that instead of just getting a bunch of emails with the subject line of a process is gone, we'll be able to identify it from the preview of the process. So of the email. So we have, I got to bounce back and forth on this, but so so what we also did here is we took the action out from here, and there's also actions down here, but we didn't use those here. And I'm going to come out of this and then I'll come back to it in just a second. Config. No. So I have a bunch of these test files that I have out there, and basically now we put the action over here, as Brett's mentioned in the other in his portion. So what this does is it gives me a specific restart procedure. So every one of these can have their own. If you wanted to, because there's several processes when you first configure the system, it goes out and takes a look at what's out there. So to have that here, it gives us the flexibility, like I said, to have everyone, because also I can't pass parameters from the other one either. So if there's any parameters I need to go to the restart job, I would have to do it from inside here. And this job basically, excuse me, just launches another detach process. So so I just have, a bunch of processes that are out here. So now to go back to process missing. Now this is one of the thresholds that we were talking about earlier. So now a status of 1 means the process is missing. If it comes back and it's 0, then it's reported as normal again. So we're going to see down in the threshold here that when the value is 1, it's critical. We're not doing the action because we did the action over in the config file. We called it from there. But now I have the email, the process is missing or on whatever node it is. Now, when that process restarts, and we'll see this in a minute, when it comes back and it says that the process is there again, it changes the status to normal, still doesn't run an action, doesn't need to, but then we'll get an email that says the process name has been restarted. So let's see. And last couple times. So this is going to be under the 30-second polling interval. But sometimes it depends when you catch the interval. I did this the other day. I'm going to stop PJS_test5 and do the one on the top. And over here we'll do minus. No, oh, at. So we see that this is doing a poll every couple seconds. We see that there's 5 is still missing. And it should be back now. I saw it come back on the other screen. So now again, over on Slack, we get a message that that it was missing. That was the first one, and we'll get the other one in just a minute. That it was restarted. We'll also see over in the email. There it goes. Oh, click on the wrong screen here. There we go. So this was the looping process. So over here we had, the process is missing. It's up in the subject line, so it's easier to see. And basically, it's the information that we saw there that gets all passed in here. And similarly with Slack, we should have the same. Now we have the follow-up message to that, where so we were missing now, and now the process has been restarted. So that's some of the things that we can do once we're in there with the messages. We can send updates and things. So there's some flexibility, and since it's calling DCL, it's like it kind of the sky's the limit as far as like what kind of things you want to what kind of things you want to do in the background. So let me stop this one. All right, so that concludes that one. The last one, I'm just going to do a couple of rapid fire ones, so I'm running out too much time here. A few security ones. So something that's interesting is we can, and is almost instantaneous. We saw some of the notifications. If I go into sysgen over here, wrong one, and I do a set auto delight save, which is coming up in a couple weeks, by the way. I'll set that to 1. And as soon as I write this, current, and we go over and look at Slack, I'll see I got a notification that I modified a sysgen parameter. Also, let me see, it's on the green one. Set audit. So say I go and change, I didn't want to type all this out, so it's a recall buffer. But if I change any audit things right away in almost real time, I'll get a message over here that security audit settings have been changed. So as the security stuff runs, it does run in real time, which is what you want. And as Brett said, we want to limit how much we don't want to enable object access or anything like that. That's going to really, it'll swamp the mailbox and cause a lot of problems. And the last one I wanted to do, let's see. Let's be on the right screen. I'm going to suspend a process. I'm going to do it on purpose. Sometimes the system, if you run into some system issues, some of your processes will go in a suspended state. This one, because it's operational, it's going to fall under the 30-second. So we can take a look. Slack's going to update right away. And again, this is the paragraph that goes with it. Processes in the special state. Basically, if it's not in LEF, LEFO, COM-O, hibernate or hibernate-O, which leaves RWMPX, the other resource weight ones, or in this case, the easiest one to duplicate was to do a suspension. Then it will send the alert, and I think that just popped up over here. So here it's showing the state of process PGS task 6 is in a suspended state, and I think that's all I have for this. Let me see if I can bring up the. I don't know if we've been keeping track. All of the stuff that's on the web page should be. You should have seen it coming up as we've been going on. I think that's all I have. Get back to here so I can relinquish my screen. Oops. There I am. Sorry, I got windows all over the place here.
Thank you, John. Did you have more, or can we pass it over to Liam?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you can take it back. I was trying to just unshare my screen, but actually you can do that, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Liam, you're up.
Cool. Yep. Let me get my screen sharing going. Can everyone see that there? Yep, cool. Hello, everyone. My presentation is a lot more static than John's one, way less cool, so I apologize. And I'll try and fly through it as well, so we have enough time for questions. My name is Liam Bainsfair, IT systems engineer. Quickly try and fly through sort of my experiences with SPI. So just very quickly, the context of our environment. Been running VMS for a long time. Our sort of real-time monitoring and alerting was essentially com files in batch queues and pinging off mail server internally. So that's kind of how that's been for a long time, which is fine. That worked, but our environment has changed a lot, and SPI sort of enhanced our ability to monitor alerts and performance. We were already running Splunk Enterprise, it's the on-premise solution. That was for other parts of our environment. So SPI kind of slotted in there really nicely. And we are using an on-call solution, as Brett mentioned, called OpsGenie. It's a cloud-based solution from Atlassian. And I'll very quickly just sort of, this is a very, very technical diagram of what we're running. But it sort of shows how everything hooks together. Try and fly through this. So I've kind of broken it up into two pieces. There's the sort of Prometheus side, and I'll talk about that first, and then there's the Splunk side, which is doing the I kind of called it the non-real-time stuff, but security is real-time, as John said, so it was kind of a mislabel there. But anyway, so sort of spun up a Windows server running Prometheus and Grafana. I did try and use other things to scrape the Prometheus interface and wasn't very successful, but that's more of a just what we had in our environment. Prometheus and Grafana works really well together. And then from the Grafana service, we push alerts as configured to OpsGenie. So I've taken a screenshot here of kind of what our dashboard looks like, which kind of says better to what we're looking at. So these are kind of the main statistics that we're looking at. The more important ones are the top two ones there. So we've configured, I don't know if you can see on the screen very well, but you can see some lines on the CPU utilization. So those are actually alerts. So we've configured alerts within Grafana when we've reached a certain threshold. I think it's set to 90%. That's the red line there. So that's when that threshold has been met for the threshold period, which is set to a minute. It fires an alert to OpsGenie. OpsGenie then sends an alert to the on-call engineer to look at. And then there are there's orange lines in there, which basically is saying it's now under the threshold and it's now waiting for it to be under the threshold for a extended period of time. I think that was also set to a minute. So if it's above 90% for a minute, fire off an alert. If it's below 90% for a minute, it then automatically closes the alert in OpsGenie. So that's super handy. So we know that the problem's been resolved without having to actually look at it. But Grafana is very, very extensible. You can set it to do just about whatever in terms of thresholds and actions you can take. The log ingestion side, so we're using our pre-existing Splunk environment. There's sorry, my phone going off. There's configured HTTP event collectors, which is what SPI will talk to. That stuff was super straightforward. Just set up the event collector and plug the event collector into the messages.txt file, and just turn on the Splunk interface, and events started going to it. I've got just a test alert search, which is set up in Splunk. So basically that line, all it's saying is every minute, look through the logs. If you find anything under these message names, I think I've selected a couple of basic ones there, CPU utilization, for example, memory utilization. Forward them off to Opsgenie using the webhook functionality. So I've got some examples of what we're seeing, this is the important bit, right? This is what the on-call engineers are seeing. The first one there is, yeah, obviously it's an alert for free disk space, showing as a percentage. That's kind of replaced a process that we had internally, which was a com file and a batch queue, which would go through all of our disks and then basically compare, like, if the amount of blocks is less than, then send off an email. So that is good there. The second one in that list is something from Grafana, which is it's got all the tags on it. Grafana has an Opsgenie integration, but it has integrations into just about everything, and it manages it for you, which is really, really handy. And the third one there was another operational type alert that actually told us about a problem with one of our tape drives. So although obviously it's not in the title there, but it prompts you to go have a look. So yeah, hopefully I went through that quickly enough so I've left enough time for questions. That's the last slide I have.
Don't worry about it. We have plenty of time.
Cool. But yeah, I'm done anyway. So if someone wants to take my screen share away from me,
Thank you, Liam.
no worries.
And I think if there are no remarks from anyone, Brett, John, Liam, we can pass to the Q&A.
No, let's go for it, Daria. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
We didn't get that many questions yet. Rob is asking if VMSSPI will support old HP OpenVMS versions like 8.4 and Alpha 7.x.
In theory, Rob, it might be a stretch to go back to, say, 7.3-2, but the code that's there today would certainly work on HP 8.4, probably 8.3, maybe 8.2. But going back further than that, it could become problematical. So in theory, yeah, but there could be some challenges.
Yeah, and I'd like to stress that while in theory it's possible, we will focus on the newer versions first and the supported versions first.
Yep.
And if you need us to support it on older versions, please reach out to us and let us know that. Because if you don't, then we will focus on what we're bringing forward, which are the new versions.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, next question from Rudy. Prometheus software is only for Linux, no OpenVMS version.
Okay, so well, Prometheus will actually run on Linux or Windows. So Prometheus itself essentially provides a time series database, and Grafana, the nice pictures that Liam had there, sits on top of Prometheus, completely separate product. But Prometheus will run on Linux and Windows. But what we have is a library for OpenVMS that can be hooked into products such as VMSSPI, or indeed applications if you so wished. If you wanted to monitor an application using Prometheus, you could hook that API into the application and scrape that feed as well and display those application metrics. So we have the bits on VMS to allow you to make use of Prometheus for monitoring components of your system, be they custom written applications or products such as VMSSPI.
We've answered the question. Another question from Rudy. Why should I choose VMSSPI instead of Cockpit Manager?
It's a good question. And it was certainly not intentional to try and create some kind of competing product or anything like that. I mean, I think the work that we originally did with VMSSPI, if you read the blog post, kind of came out of a customer need more than anything else. So the fact that that came out of a customer need might suggest that maybe Cockpit Manager didn't handle that particular customer scenario. I suppose possibly it's a while since I looked at Cockpit Manager, so I'm not sure how reliably I can answer the question. But I think one of the main things we've tried to achieve with VMSSPI is that integration with services such as Splunk and Dynatrace and so forth. What we're seeing with I would say a fair number of our larger enterprise customers is that these are the sorts of monitoring and alerting solutions they're moving towards, right? So across their business, they've got VMS systems, they've got Windows, they've got Linux, they've got just about everything imaginable. And they want to be monitoring those systems in largely the same way, using some kind of centralized service like Splunk or Dynatrace, PagerDuty, etc. So what we've done with VMSSPI allows them to do exactly that, right? They don't need a separate solution for monitoring the VMS systems. They can hook it into their core centralized system in the same way. Now, my apologies if Cockpit Manager does actually support some of this. As I say, it's a while since I looked at it, but that was kind of the main thing we were trying to achieve with VMSSPI.
Okay, thank you. I hope this answers the question, and we're very happy there is competition in the VMS world, actually. It's great, and I looked at your website, and there is you have some information on on the Cockpit Manager. I wish there was more, but thank you. Question from Tilo: how flexible am I in defining when a file is actually a hot file for me or a busy process, in fact, is a looping one?
I might defer to John to answer some of this, but in terms of the looping process, the algorithm is a little more complicated than John described. Basically, the process has to be hogging the CPU for some period of time. I think that is 2 minutes, and performing essentially no I/O. So it's basically in a very tight CPU loop. But John, do you want to have a go at answering Tilo's question?
I can't really talk about the hot files. I haven't played with that too much. I have what's set in there, so unfortunately I can't answer that right now, but I can get back to you, or I can get back to Tilo.
Sure.
Okay. We'll try and distribute a document after the webinar with the answers to all the questions. So hopefully John can get us something before that is distributed. Thank you. Lauren is asking John, interesting security real-time alerts. Can it handle system break-ins? For example, the show intrusion display. Yes,
that was originally on my plan for today, but I ended up changing it. But yes, it'll do. There is, if you look through the messages file, you'll see that there's almost any kind of security event that can happen. It'll handle break-ins detection. It'll also, it's an enabled intrusion alert. So once you get to whatever your LGI params are set, it'll also detect that it's that it's an intruder. So yes, the answer is
okay. Thank you. Catalin is asking, are you considering implementing erlog.sys monitoring and decryption to replace WebS, or alternatively some hardware monitoring based on IPMI?
It's not something we have considered. No, I'm talking slowly because now I'm thinking what that might entail. Interesting thought, but the simple answer at this stage, no.
Okay. And we always welcome the details. So if you have a specific question, something specific that you want us to support, please reach out and we can talk about it. Always helps to have more information. Thanks. Richard is asking, how does this relate to TDC, which was available on Alpha and Integrity, but is not part of x86? Is there going to be a mechanism on x86 to feed system information into a T4 equivalent? I guess these are two questions.
Right. So, well, TDC, we can do that on x86. That's more a supply and demand situation, but there's no particular problem making TDC available on x86 if there's sufficient requirement to do so. I think that the key difference there is, like I said, I mean, products like TDC or PerfDat or whatever are focused very much on performance metrics. The function of VMSSPI is more around, detecting a problem and telling you about it as soon as it can. Now, obviously, some such problems may be performance related, but as I'm sure you're aware, there are literally, in excess of 1,000 odd metrics, performance-related metrics that you can collect on a VMS system. If you then start multiplying that across all the processes that you may have running on your system, you can end up with a very large number. Products like TDC and PerfDat and so forth allow you, and T4 for that matter, allow you to collect all of that data. That, as I say, is not the purpose of VMSSPI. The purpose of VMSSPI is to identify bad things, break-ins, looping processes, and so on and so forth. For sure, TDC could help you to identify some of those things, but that's not the primary purpose of that product. In terms of T4, what was the second question there, Darian?
Is there going to be a mechanism on x86 to feed system information into a T4 equivalent?
Oh, we will make T4 available for x86. That's in the works. In fact, most of it works today in the lab. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Lauren is asking, Brett, I assume that the 3 VMSSPI processes run with full privilege. Do scripts need to be written with the principle of least privilege in mind?
I honestly can't remember exactly what's in those scripts. John might be able to enlighten me a little bit on that, but I mean, they're obviously running with a high level of privilege because they have to. As to whether it's running with all privileges, I couldn't say at the moment. John, can you comment on that?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Just give me a moment.
I think there are some constraints, but yeah.
So we're running, I don't know if it's easier to share. We're running a detached process. UIC is 1,4. It doesn't specify, it gives me AST limbs, quota limbs, working set information. It doesn't specify priv. So I think because it's running under the system account,
Exactly.
if you have your default priv set low, then that will control the security side of it.
But yeah, fundamentally, it's running a system. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Brian is asking, is there any way to add throttling to the reset actions to avoid race conditions? For example, slowing down the restart interval or not restarting an application if it has been restarted X times in the last period?
The simple answer to that is yes. And if you read my blog post, you'd probably see that. But although it's buried inside a lot of words. One of the things I learned many years ago when I inadvertently took down a New Zealand government department's email service was that having throttles in these sorts of systems is a very, very good idea. So yes, you can apply a throttle to literally any message that's defined in the messages file. Yeah. That possibly doesn't quite address everything that you've asked there about, restarts and so on and so forth. But for example, you could use the throttle in the messages.txt file to say, look, only tell me about this problem once a minute. So in that context, it's only going to perform the action once a minute or something like that, for example. So yes, you can throttle things.
Okay. We have 2 minutes left, but a few more questions. Are you guys okay staying on the call for a few more minutes?
I'm fine. I'm
Yeah.
getting hungry. It's going to be breakfast time soon.
All right. Fernando is asking, this software could replace the PerfDat metrics? I guess, could this software replace the PerfDat metrics?
Well, like I said before, I mean, a product like PerfDat collects literally hundreds, possibly upwards of 1,000 metrics. So in that context, VMSPI could not replace it, right? Because it doesn't collect the same number of metrics. It comes down to the problem you're trying to solve, what you're trying to do. During the course of its work, VMSSPI obviously collects some number of metrics. For example, it needs to determine whether processes are looping and things like that. That requires the collection of some data. So it is making calls to system services like getJPI and getSYI to collect various data. But it is nowhere near as comprehensive in terms of that data as a product such as PerfDat or other performance monitoring tools. TDC was mentioned before, for example. So no, it's not a replacement for PerfDat. Different product, really. Different type of problem it's trying to solve. Some overlap, but yeah, really different product.
Right. And then I think a related question is VMS from Tilo. Is VMSSPI only a real-time monitoring tool, or do we actually store collected data and can replay it later on?
That's a really good way of putting it, Tilo. So no, the simple answer, it does not store any of that data. I mean, obviously data is going to be stored in Splunk or in Prometheus, but VMSSPI itself is not storing anything, no.
Okay.
Well, it does this. It stores events in the output file, but that's
That's
the extent of it.
That's what I mean. I mean, it
Yeah.
sends them to where they've got to go, whether it's a file or to Splunk or to whatever. But it's not keeping a history that you could go back and do some performance analysis or whatever on. No.
All right. And last question from Daniel. Any plans to let us change more frequencies, thresholds, etc. in the message file? For example, a process must loop for 5 minutes instead of the current 2 minutes before an alert is made.
Yeah, some thought has been given to that because, you know, I do agree that that's kind of a hardwired algorithm. And there are probably a few other situations like that. So what I'd suggest is, because I'll probably forget, Daria, you've got the notes there, or the comments in chat. So
Yep.
we'll take some of this stuff on board, and, you know, if we think it makes sense, and I think that one, to be honest, does, and it's feasible to actually implement those things without, you know, open heart surgery on the product, then we'll certainly look at putting those kinds of things on the roadmap.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so no more questions and nothing in the chat. Yeah, I think we did great. Any comments from Brett, John, Liam?
No, I'm good. We'd better let Liam get to bed, and I'm going to go home and have breakfast.
All right. Thanks everyone for participating, and thanks for dialing in. And we will send you a follow-up with the recording, questions, and everything else. And please stay tuned for new webinars. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.